News, information and conversation from BBC Radio Stoke.
Well, he worked in the railways not only before privatisation, but before beaching. And just before Christmas, his services to the industry earned him a trip to Buckingham Palace and an MBE from the Queen. And to bring him back to earth, he's my guest before two today. David Wood is now the Production Standards Manager for Railtrack in the Midlands. We were just discussing earlier on that you used to be the Operations Standards Manager, and now you're the Production Standards Manager. Do you actually get a new job when you get a new title?
Not really. We perhaps have a reorganisation, but it's the same job, perhaps a slightly different area, no more money.
It makes it good, though. It makes it look like you've had lots of jobs when you've only had a few.
Oh, it can do, yes.
This MBE, as I called an MEB before, it's an easy mistake to make.
You're not the first one.
Bit of a difference. I'm not the first. It must be one of those obvious tongue twisters.
That's right. What's
it like going to Buck House?
It's quite exciting. It's something that I think you do once in a lifetime. Well, you do once in a lifetime. And we had now Sir Robert Horton's car to take us with the chauffeur, so he had a rehearsal for taking his boss.
That's excitement indeed.
Yeah, and I think the family see more than the recipient does, because we get to wait in the picture gallery, and then we're led in, and you get perhaps a few seconds with the Queen, and she puts the medal on. I often wondered how she put it on with all the pins, but they actually put a picture hook on your lapel and she drops it on.
Really? That's a good idea.
She says a few words, you shake hands, and away you go again.
What did she say to you?
I don't honestly remember. Something like, what do you do?
That's a good start, if she's giving you a medal for what you do.
Yeah.
Why have I given you this medal?
Well, I don't suppose she knows, really, does she?
Oh, I'm sure she must do. She chooses people specifically, obviously. Everybody knows that. What does MBE stand for?
Well, the order is the Most Excellent Order of the British Empire, and MBE is a member of that order, and there are various other...
So do you use it? Have you got David Wood, Esquire, MBE on your cheques now?
I've got it on my cheques. My wife insisted it went on the cheques, yes.
Really?
And she works in the bank, so she arranged it.
Would you have had it on the cheques?
Probably not.
They always say this, that it's always the women who like the idea of having it where people might see it.
Yeah, probably so. I think probably she was more excited than I was.
You weren't excited?
Oh, I wouldn't say I wasn't excited. I said she's probably more excited than I was.
So, what was it for?
It's shown as services to the railway industry. I never actually saw what was submitted. My wife knew a lot about it. She knew about it for 2 years before I did.
2 years?
Because it was apparently put up by Nigel Murphy, the Safety and Standards Manager, 2 years ago. And it took that long to come through. But my wife actually... They rang her up and asked her about my scouting and church activities to put in the citation. But I've never actually seen what they did put in.
That's astonishing. I think if I knew about something like that for 2 years, I think most of our listeners, 2 years to keep a secret like that.
Sounds very... I was amazed. Yeah.
What's it like? Does it change your life at all? Are you more important? Do you feel you're more important because of it?
I think it gives you more confidence in yourself. I think it must do. I don't think I feel more important.
You go into a shop to exchange something and they're not very nice to you. You can flash your chequebook around and they'll see they're dealing with someone important.
Nobody's actually noticed it yet. I don't think.
Should you go around wearing it?
No, my mother-in-law thinks I should wear it to go to church every Sunday morning.
You should do.
You hardly wear a medal on you can.
You can. Well, war veterans do, and rightly so. Proud of them.
Not every Sunday morning.
No, maybe not. Maybe not.
I'm not sure when you would wear it, actually.
No, something to keep in your drawer and bring out every now and again.
That's right.
But we must talk about why you got this, because obviously services to the rail industry, we really ought to talk about what you did, because you started right at the beginning, sort of 17 and a half. Your first job was in the railways. What attracted you to them?
Well, I've always been interested in railways. I think I'd reached the point where I got to the end of the road at school. I got a friend who worked for the railways, and it went from there.
So it was one of those accidental things?
It was sort of accidental, following your nose sort of thing.
As we said earlier on, it wasn't even just before privatisation that you joined. I mean, Beeching hadn't even started his campaign.
Beeching started in 63, I think it was, and I started in 60.
What was it like to be in the middle of that? I mean, there are people that don't like what Beeching did, and I suppose there are people who think it was a good idea, but it must have been a big change nonetheless.
It was a very big change, yes. The railway network was very much bigger than it is now. It's still got steam engines, all the little stations, and train services that, long forgotten now. I mean, trains used to run to Newcastle in those days, and to Hanley, up the loop line.
Did they run on time, though? That's the question. Or have we always had late trains?
Oh, you always have had late trains. I think you always will have late trains. There's so many factors that get in the way.
So what did you do? What was your first job with the railways?
My first job was publishing notices. We, as you imagine, the railway has a timetable, but you have to run special trains from time to time, and as many people know, there's engineering work at weekends that alters the trains, and somebody has to publish the notice which tells all the staff what's happening. So I was involved in that. We used to get the information, was presented to us, and we used to put it together in various forms, from a sort of long term down to 8 hours beforehand.
Did that fill a whole working day doing that?
Oh yes. There was about 4 or 5 of us doing that.
You had that many alterations already in 1960?
Oh yes. As I say, those special trains. You can imagine the sort of notice that came out for a bank holiday weekend. It'd be about 200 pages long.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yes.
And all this information was passed around still at that age by telegram and Morse code as well?
Well, not all of it. There was a printed notice, there was a Romeo thing, but the short-term stuff was put through a telegraph office. And by that time, certain circuits had got teleprinters on, but they still use the Morse code for other circuits. Slightly different. I don't know Morse code. I didn't do it, but they're slightly different from the tappers, because they had a handle. They moved from side to side, so there's a different tone for the shorts and the long.
Ah, interesting. The next job was involved in the electrification of the West Coast, our beloved West Coast Main Line.
Yes.
Again, another big job.
This was when it was modernised originally, well, if you like, in the 1960s. I think we started running electric trains. Well, we started running electric trains between Crewe and Manchester in 1959. That was before I started.
What was before steam? Before
steam, and the diesels were coming in. Diesel started in the mid-50s.
Do you have a particular love of steam, or were you glad to see it go and the modernisation come in?
I like steam, yes. I suppose I have got a love of steam, but on the other hand, I've got a practical view of it, I suppose. And I don't think, as a practical proposition for a professional working railway, it was really on nowadays. The dirt, and in fact, we would never get away with a smoke control accident, I suppose. But it was a very dirty and fairly inefficient way of operating a full-time railway.
How did you manage to electrify? I mean, you couldn't really do it in bits, could you? I mean, you couldn't sort of have or did you? Did you have trains sort of that were electrified along one bit of track and then carried on as steam? Or, I mean, how did it work?
Well, it was done in bits. It was done in about 7 stages. Between Crewe and Manchester was the first bit that was done, and then the electric locomotive came off the train at Crewe, and they put a diesel or a steam engine on to take it to Euston. Then they did the Crewe Liverpool, and then they moved gradually southwards. This line through Stoke was the last bit. It's about 1966, 67, I think.
Did you have to stop all the trains on a particular bit when it was being dealt with, or did you manage to run services around it?
Oh, pretty well. We ran services around it. They took blockages at certain times, mainly at the weekends, while they did certain types of work. But during the week, the service was very much thinned out. Stoke had 1 train to Euston at that time, in the 60s. 9:30 started at Stoke, went to Euston.
And how long did it take to get there?
A lot longer than it does now. You couldn't go to London and back for a meeting in a day in those days.
Was it, I mean, people, when all this was going on, were they more tolerant than we seem to be these days? Because people are always complaining about the trains, they're too slow, they're late, they're cancelled. I mean, when all this was going on, it was quite a big job. Were we more tolerant of this then?
Well, I think we expected trains to take longer to get between points in those days. I don't know whether people are more tolerant or not. He's right, we are intolerant nowadays. We do expect, we expect all forms of transport to be on time, trained more so than most, I think.
That's fair enough, though, isn't it?
Yes, I suppose we should make allowances, because there are factors which are outside people's control. I mean, for example, a train I went to work on last winter was delayed for perhaps 20 minutes at Stafford because an old chap was taken ill, and we had to call the paramedics in. So those sort of things you can't really...
Yes, you can't really
cater for.
Criticise for that, can you? In 1963, you moved into the new works planning. What was that all about?
Well, it was the operators of the railway deciding what they wanted to do in modernising the railway in small or large ways, and then finding the finance and making a case for it. And we used to actually do the specification for, in 1963 I was very much a junior clerk, mainly the filing clerk, but that's how you learn your job, isn't it?
So you were doing what exactly? What was your 9 to 5 or whatever? What was your day's work?
In 1963, mainly filing. Later on, as time went on, actually doing the jobs, going out to site meetings, specifying what we wanted to do, telling engineers what we wanted to achieve, and then organising the finance for them to actually do it. It was a very varied job. I think mention 1 or 2 things. We did travel centre schemes, we did depot schemes, fueling points, washing plants, all sorts of things.
You were also involved in things like planning applications at one stage.
Oh yes, the railway we still do. We get anybody who submits for planning permission to do anything next to the railway. The planning authority has to send it to the railway for comment. So we go through hundreds of these. Some of my people now get absolutely fed up with them because most of them don't, and it's not of great interest, but it's just the odd one that is.
So if somebody wants to, if their garden backs onto your railway line and they want to build a garden shed,
we will get a planning application for it.
Why?
Why? So that we can safeguard the railway's interests. We're not very interested in that sort of thing, but what we are interested in is if we get a planning application which involves a road junction or an entrance near to a level crossing, for example, because that means that we have a possibility that if somebody's waiting to turn right, and they can't do, they might block traffic back across a crossing, in which case, of course, we've got a possible hazardous situation, so we have to guard for that sort of thing. If we want to put lights near to a railway, we have to have a look at it, because it might prevent a train driver from seeing his signals.
Because I think it's the train line to Birmingham. There's somebody that's got all sorts of stuff in their back garden, which is all train related. I don't know whether you've heard of this person.
No, you're thinking of near Stockport.
Is it?
Yeah.
It's the other direction, is it?
The other direction, yes.
But
yeah.
he's got bits of trains and bits of stations and platforms and signs and stuff.
Engine cabs.
Did he get special treatment because it was all railway related?
Well, I don't know. It isn't my area, but I doubt he would apply for planning permission for that. We wouldn't be very interested in that anyway, because it doesn't actually affect the railway. We're only interested where it has an effect on the operating of the railway.
One of the things that amused me as well was that part of the job at this stage in your life was sorting out and paying the phone bills for such a large organisation. Yeah. That's quite...
Well, we used to look after the railway telephone communication system at that time. And obviously we've got telephones, and we get a bill for them. Somebody has to check that they're okay. And we had people do that. One of the things I learned, actually, at one point was that... you can't manage without the junior clerk, you can manage without the boss, because everybody went on leave one week and I ended up doing all the phone bills to make sure we didn't get cut off.
Later on, doing a similar sort of thing, I mean, you were liaising with railway inspectorates and such regarding new works, and apparently one platform sort of seemed to have been accidentally mislaid.
Yes, when I first started that job. I started this job in 1989 with a clear desk and think, what on earth do I do? And gradually it built up, and one of the ways just to find out what was going on was by reading some of the railway magazines. And we realised that Tuckbury Station was on the go, which was a reopening, or a new station in effect. And it was due to open on the Monday, with a fun day and official opening. So we had to get the railway inspector down to inspect it and approve it. And this was arranged for the Friday. And I had to go by train to Derby to pick up the local manager and come back by car. And as I went through Tuckbury Station, I looked out and saw that one of the platforms wasn't in fact there. I got a good start.
It's a bit of a drawback. How had that happened?
It was just so late. They got such a tight schedule, they hadn't actually built the thing.
Did they get it done in time?
They got it done in time.
Built it in 2 days?
They finished it off in 2 days, yes. It was only a timber trestle thing.
That's pretty impressive, mate.
Yeah.
Get that done.
But it was a bit embarrassing.
Yes, I can imagine.
Will you please inspect this platform that isn't here?
What did they say, or did you get it all sorted before they had to see it?
We sorted the one that was built, and I think they got the trestles up for the other one, and we worked it out. And unfortunately, the inspector was very understanding.
The division that you were at, that we were talking about before, closed in 1984. That must, and you quite enjoyed it there, so that must have been quite...
Yes, it was the Stoke divisional office. There were several the railway was divided into a number of divisions, and we had one based on Stoke, which covered the North Staffordshire, North Wales. And it was a very friendly office, yes. We had a very good atmosphere here.
So what did you do when it closed?
I moved to Crewe at that time. We were accommodated. Well, I found another job at Crewe.
And you were an accident clerk?
I was an accident clerk for 12 months.
That sounds fun. What does an accident clerk do?
Well, on the railway there are a large number of incidents or accidents. They're not all major crashes or anything like that, but they're people who fall over on platforms or fall downstairs or delay. In one instance we had a letter from a solicitor who claimed his client had fallen down the escalator at Crewe Station. They normally claim negligence and breach of statutory duty. It normally means that they're going to put a claim in. Unfortunately, we've never found the escalator on Crewe Station yet.
Oh, there wasn't one?
There wasn't one. That's why she fell down.
What would have happened? I mean, had she mistaken her stations, or was she just trying it on?
She probably got the wrong station. I don't know where she meant.
Poor
I
lamb.
did find out.
She obviously had a bang on the head so much that she didn't know where she'd been. Was it just people, or I mean, were you involved in accidents for staff as well?
I personally didn't get involved much in accidents for staff, and the office did deal with them, yes.
Did you have to... I mean, was your job to try and stop having to pay out, or you were just there to facilitate?
No, I think my job was really to find out the facts at that time. We used to, if something happened, we used to get all the reports together, and then we had a claims officer in London who actually dealt with the claim. Our job was simply to supply him with the facts of it.
Did it happen often?
Oh, yes.
All the time?
Yeah.
Why was that? Was that because the railways weren't safe, or because people weren't looking where they were going?
Well, the railway's a big organisation, and people slip, fall, trap fingers indoors, or in windows, all sorts of things. It's amazing what people can do.
It must have been really frustrating. This, oh no, got another one who managed to get her fingers stuck in the door.
Yeah, oh yes, it is. And you sometimes think, well, you know, okay, they've got the fingers trapped in the door, but why did they shut the door on the fingers in the first place?
Do you ever have to pay out any huge amounts of money?
I don't really know. I never got involved in that, the actual payout side. They do pay out, certainly, yeah.
I certainly remember my mother used to work in the railways when she was a student, delivering tea, and they have a system at Newcastle Central Station, or they don't now, but they did decades ago, where you have a lift thing that basically involves you just yelling and hoping no one moves it before you get onto it, otherwise you'd fall down the hole, which sounds very entertaining. So it's probably just as well that you didn't work.
I think you'd be allowed to do that now.
No, probably not. You probably weren't allowed to do it then. She was probably going the shortcut round. So after being an accident clerk, what next?
Well, then I moved into what we call the signalling side, which is not quite what people think. What we were doing was looking at signalling plans when people wanted to, for some reason, wanted to alter the track and signalling arrangement, looking at that. And then we have to tell drivers, train crew, that alterations are taking place. So we have to put a notice out and circulate it. If you move a signal, you have to tell the driver it's moving.
Yeah, that's probably a good idea.
Yeah, or you're altering the configuration of it or something like that. I mean, that's putting it very simply. So we put notices out to tell people what's happening. And then also the railway has its rule book, and it also has its regulations for train signalling, which are quite large books. And they apply in general terms, but you have to vary them slightly to meet local situations. So somebody has to write the instructions to the signalman to tell him what he can do and what he can't do.
It's an interesting job doing that.
It is interesting, yes. It's quite a complicated job at times. You have to have a fair knowledge of the rules and regulations. And you have to be able to know what you can do and what you can't do. Because if you're varying a rule, you've got to know why you're varying, and that it's safe to do so. So there's quite a serious implication in that sort of work. When
privatisation came along, I suppose you're doing a lot of what you've done in the past. You're doing now. So I suppose was it easy for you when everything was privatised and split up to choose which bit you'd like to belong to?
Well, the bit that I belonged to was naturally went into Railtrack, so it wasn't really a choice. We'd gone through several organisations. We'd moved from crew. We'd had what we called an organisation for quality, so we'd got into regional railways. I had in Birmingham. Then that bit naturally moved into Railtrack Midlands. So there was no real choice for me.
You've also been involved in things like the Manchester Airport rail link as well.
Yeah. That was quite interesting, because it was when I got involved in the early stages, and then I moved out halfway through, but at that point we were sort of setting down the route that it was going. And I suppose one of the more interesting features was the design of the station, which was done by architects in private practice, not by the railway architects. And we were involved in the practical planning and specifying to the architect. And my job at that time was liaising with the railway inspectors. And one of the things we did was, with the architect and the project manager, we went down to their headquarters in London, which then was Marsham Street, and did a presentation to them about what we wanted to do, which was to get them involved in it in an early stage rather than later on and find they didn't like it.
Yes. Are you interested in trains? I mean, you've been involved in so many different aspects of the railways throughout your life. Are you interested in trains as a leisure pursuit? I mean, You're into railway modelling, I understand.
Well, yes, I've got quite a lot of model railway stuff. I just wish I'd got the time to get it down. It's all stacked away in the loft at the moment.
You're sort of a professional train spotter in a way, aren't you? Because you have the hobby and the professional clout to know what you were talking about.
Yes, I mean, it's very nice to be able to have a hobby and then to be able to take it up as a profession. I gave up train spotting many years ago, and I worked in an office at Crewe, which was called the Bungalow, which looked over the South Junction at Crewe, and it was a question of do I take train numbers or do I do some work? I thought perhaps I better do some work.
Yes, probably a good idea. Did it get boring? I mean, train spotting is one of those hobbies that you're particularly involved with people. If you're into that kind of thing, you like it a lot. But I suppose if you're doing that kind of thing all day, it would get a bit much, wouldn't it? Well,
yes, I don't think I would take train numbers nowadays. I'm interested in what goes on, and there's so many aspects of the railway that you're always learning something new about it. But of course, I've had the advantage of being able to go into it in very much more depth and to understand it more.
Tell us about the flooding in the Mersey Tunnel.
Oh yes, so this is one thing we had to look at. We're still having problems with it now, I think, but we were getting far too much water in the Mersey Tunnel, and it does have an effect on the track and signalling to some extent. I mean, it doesn't actually above the rails, but what's happened in Liverpool, and I believe it's similar in London, is that the industry has stopped taking water out of the strata, so the water table is rising very rapidly.
Oh, that'd be good news for our water companies. I wonder if
you would think so. We used to suggest we ought to pump it out, put in tanks and take it down to the southeast.
But take it up to Yorkshire, more to the point.
Yeah, Yorkshire, yeah. So the water table is actually rising, so they're having to pump more and more water out of the tunnel. We were looking at where they could take it to and how they could drain it away.
And have they achieved that?
I don't think they have achieved it totally yet. They've improved the situation. But I've left that area, so I've lost touch with it. I don't know.
It's not your problem if everyone dies in a flood in the Mersey Tunnel.
Well, I don't think it's quite to that. It's not quite that serious. Although I suppose eventually, in another 100 years, it could be.
Well, I suppose everything that you've done, though, I mean, it might be just a job to you. I mean, you might enjoy it, but quite a lot of what you were involved in, if you got it wrong, would be quite dangerous, wouldn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yes. It is a factor which is becoming more true nowadays. If you make a mistake, and then there's an accident, of course you can be held liable for it. Well,
it's a good job that you were good enough to get an MBE, really, wasn't it? We will all rest easy on our railways now.
I don't know if that stopped me making a mistake.
Don't say that, or she'll take it back. David Wood, thank you very much for joining us as my guest before two today. If you just joined us, or you joined us halfway through, David Wood, as you may have realised, has something to do with the railways. He is currently the Production Standards Manager for Railtrack in the Midlands, and has an MBE to prove how good he is at his job. Somebody else who's pretty good at her job.